Coming up on today's show. On today's program, we are going to look back for the last year and take some of the highlights, some of the best tips from our professional organizer crowd and bring them to you.
We cleaned out her pantry and we found like 14 cans of pineapple. And I said, "What's with the pineapple? Are you like doing something special?" She said, "No, it's just always on my mind that I'm going to make a pineapple cake." And obviously I just keep buying more pineapple and not making it again.
We're not sure what next is. And so one of the reasons why I put that post together was just to give people an idea of, if they're stuck in a certain way, some strategies for how they could move past that stuck.
Season 3 highlights today on Keeping You Organized. Hello and welcome to Keeping You Organized. It is that time of year again. We've just wrapped up season number 3 of our podcast, weekly podcast, that is, Keeping You Organized. Now, on today's program, we are going to look back for the last year and take some of the highlights, some of the best tips from our professional organizer crowd and bring them to you. So let's get right into it now. Season 3 highlights on Keeping You Organized. Hello and welcome to Keeping You Organized. Today we're going to do a little bit different show. We don't have a professional organizer on to give us tips, but we're going to talk about something really exciting. We have been featured on the Lifetime Network show Designing Spaces, and we're kind of going to go behind the scenes. We're going to talk about, why we were called in to help the homeowner that we're going to talk to today. We're going to talk about some of the behind the scenes production stuff and some of the solutions that we offered. Okay, well, we also had probably one of our most popular products now, it's only a few years old, is our cascading wall organizer. And that was the colorful thing that hung on the wall, but it also serves a couple purposes. It's got removable files in it, but you can also cascade it down or up and put it into a little carrying, you put the little cord closure on it and take it downstairs or take it with you on appointments or however you want to use that. Seemed like the crew there that day, everybody wanted one of those, and we were able to give a few people those. How's that cascading wall organizer worked for you?
Yeah, I asked for 2. So in 2 ways. So I actually, since I got 2 of them that day, it works in 2 ways. I kept one of them up in the office, which is excellent because I can put files that I'm working on or files that need to go, and I can wrap it up and take it with me on the road. I do a lot of flights, a lot of car driving as well, but a lot of flights, and it fits perfectly when it folds up into my backpack / laptop bag. So love that. And then I also asked for the second one for my kitchen because it holds menus and mail and all those kind of items.
Yeah, we're finding that's just a real popular home solution, office solution, and
we cleaned out her pantry and we found like 14 cans of pineapple. And I said, "What's with the pineapple? Are you like doing something special?" She said, "No, it's just always on my mind that I'm going to make a pineapple cake." And obviously I just keep buying more pineapple and not making it again.
Oh, that's great. Well, let's talk about some specific areas of the house that are involved with clutter. And as long as we're near the pantry, let's talk about the kitchen. And what are some quick wins that people can get in decluttering their kitchen? You do a lot of this stuff, you work with people. What are 2 or 3 things that people can do to just get that kitchen under control?
Well, I always say I steal all my ideas. So I have like very few original ideas. So just go to the grocery store and look how things are grouped in the grocery store because they've got it down to a science, right? We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Right. And that way it's also a nice way to kind of look at how things are stacked and how they're labeled and facing forward. And if that pleases you, try to borrow those tips in your own home. So group your breakfast items together, or if you have children in the house, small children especially, group your snack items together. Or if you're trying to eat more healthy, balanced, less junk food, get rid of the junk food. Why have the temptation there, right? Just keep the good stuff. If you like wine, bring your wine forward.
Right. So that's kind of more the food stuff. And how about some of those things we talked about earlier, utensils that maybe you want to keep, but you don't have them, you don't need them all on the counter, right?
Right. So in those circumstances, I tell people to use your prime real estate for the stuff that really matters, right? So if you haven't used your ice cream maker and bread maker in 3 years, but you're not willing to let go of them, they don't need to be hip height or eye level. They need to be way up or way down so that, you want the things that you have to have access to every day where you can immediately access them.
Right.
So this is a life document organizer kit that Smead has developed. And basically what they've done is they've broken down a few chunky categories that apply to all of us, such as our contact information, which includes, who is our attorney. It also includes who are our what's our digital presence online? How do we get into potentially either social media accounts or, let's say, other accounts that are online? It also has communication and wishes. That's really important for anybody. If you've ever been to a service and you've said to yourself, oh, she would have hated that this is what's going on for this memorial service, then it's important to take control of it now. You're the key to your own destiny. So besides the will and the living trust, healthcare proxies, this is a place where you're able to keep burial plot deeds, as well as future plans and your spiritual wishes. So that's a neat category. Ownership includes everything that's property and valuables, which could be everything from just your regular vehicles and your property taxes, deeds, mortgages. And it also has a few more files for health, financials. Financials is a big one. Where are you keeping your IRAs? Where are you keeping your investment records? So this is really a go-to, not just for someone who's utilizing it, but for somebody else who might have to grab it and go off to an appointment to, support someone who might be in a time of need where they're, hey, I'm here, I'm at the hospital, I really need those health records. Can you grab my life organizer kit and help me out here?
Right. What are some of the most popular questions that you get?
A lot of my clients come to me with struggles about paper. They have too much mail coming in or mail that's not been sorted. They have kids' backpacks lying around. They have extra shoes, extra sporting equipment, all of this stuff that's piled up, and it's just kind of driving them nuts. Okay. And it's kind of this weight on their shoulders. And how do I deal with it? It can seem overwhelming when there's not a plan in place. Right. I start similar to Jeanette saying, what are your goals? What works in this space and what doesn't work in this space? Right. What are your needs? Do we need the sporting equipment? Can this be kept in the garage? Well, if it's a ski boot, no, because you want it warm. Right. Those types of things. How do you want people to be able to move through here? Right. What are your kids really going to do with their backpacks? Can we really expect them to go across the house and put them in their marked spot, or are they going to be dropped here? And if it's going to be dropped at the front door, let's hang up a hook, or what are our options? Right. And I usually like to start with what do they want to accomplish, and then brainstorm and get a feel of what their aesthetic is and what their, everybody has a different level of organization to be happy. And it's not, I don't come in and say, this is where you have to be. I come in and try to gauge where do they want to be, right, and then how do we make that happen.
Now, I'm assuming that several people have lots of priorities, right? Priority is supposed to be one thing, right?
Right.
But how do you focus on the first thing? How do you come to that? You can't do everything at once, right? So sure. How do you get them to, how do we start? What's the first thing?
It varies. And I think one of the great things about being an organizer is that all of my sessions are specific to that client, and everything kind of ebbs and flows on what the client says and what, even how they're feeling and how they respond to things. And you can kind of see some are more anxious, others are, I don't know, some are really relaxed and just want to get this stuff dealt with. Usually, once we know what their priorities are, I will start with a game plan with what are we going to do? How are we going to approach this? And frequently, let's say it's a pile of clutter. What I want to do is come through and separate it. I want to say, here's all of your art supplies. Here's all of your kitchen things. Maybe it's a pile in the basement. And here's things that have it's kind of become a dumping ground. So what I want to do is go in, figure out what's what, and then the client can take a look and say, I don't need 3 crock pots. I don't need 14 fondue sets or what have you. And then from there, we can say, okay, these are the things you don't need. Some of these might be very nice things that you want to give to an aunt or to a nephew or what have you. Other things might be great for goodwill, or we can look at what are other charities that are important to things that you care about. Right. And let's try to find a place that's meaningful to put those things.
Right.
I have launcher, the heavy bedding. So on all the beds in the house, the guest bed, the master bed, kid bed, we have duvets and duvet covers and blankets, comforters, all the heavy stuff. And I want to put that stuff away for the spring, but I don't want to put it away unlaundered, because then when fall rolls around, I'm going to have a huge job to do. And I just prefer it's put away clean just to begin with. So instead of trying to stuff all of that stuff in my own washing machine at home, which I might be able to do, but it's going to take hours and hours and hours of different wash cycles. What I normally like to do is I go over to the laundromat and I use 3 or 4 washers at a time and get everything done in the nice big washers. I feel like they get a lot cleaner. And what I do is I never go over there alone, because my laundromat has a coffee shop right next door.
Nice.
And I'll go over either with my husband or my daughter or a friend of mine. And while everything's being washed and dried, just kind of sit and catch up and have some coffee and chit chat. So I just think it's kind of like a dual purpose, and it makes washing more fun to do on my list.
Right. And it's not, that's only a couple hours too. And I think if you know that you're using multiple machines, that really helps consolidate the time. You don't need 10 hours to do that. You need 2 or 3, but then you can get all of it done at one time. Right.
Usually card pushing Kathy is kind of in for the kill. Like, she wants to sell to you. And you come away with a feeling like you've got a target on your back, and someone's just almost attacked you. She's trying really hard to be interesting and on, and it just, I think it can come across as disingenuine, not real. And so I like to kind of compare her to a successful Sally. So this is another type of networker, someone who gets networking for what it could be, and that is planting seeds, meeting people to see what you could do to help them, building connections, starting to cultivate relationships. And Sally is really focused on being more interested in what others have to say, because there's a lot to learn there. And if we do a good job of listening, we can be more effective in our networking. So she's interested rather than trying to be interesting.
You're watching Season 3 highlights on Keeping You Organized. We'll have more tips and more highlights from Season 3 coming up after this short break. It's the back to school sale at myorganized.life. Whether you're a student, a parent, or teacher, get a great deal on all of our unique organizing products. Save 20% site-wide and get free shipping on all orders. Go to myorganized.life now and save for back to school. It's just for you. myorganized.life by Smead. Find us at www.myorganized.life. myorganized.life. We are back on Keeping You Organized, going through the past year, looking at highlights from Season 3. So let's jump right back into it here on Keeping You Organized. I think this must be one of those stressful areas, right, that people think about a lot. I know we have the website content where we talk about spring cleaning and house cleaning tips, and it's always very, very visited. We get a lot of people do that. So,
well, I think the reason why, John, is because we are so busy in our day-to-day lives. We don't have stay-at-home moms and women whose careers tend to be homemakers for the entire adult life that they have. So there used to be time.
You mean June Cleaver doesn't exist anymore?
June Cleaver does not live here anymore.
Oh, man.
So that means we have to change how we approach things. And doing a spring cleaning and really a fall cleaning 6 months later is the best way to handle those extra projects that you don't do every week or 2 weeks in your maintenance cleaning, and yet those things are important and they need to get done.
Okay, Mythbusters, how would we start with that, or maybe mistakes or that people make? I mean, everybody I think wants to be productive, don't they? So, I mean, how do you get over that? What are some of the big mistakes that people make?
One of the biggest mistakes I find that people make, even if I'm just on the beach and talking to someone and they tell me they run their own business as, a massage therapist, is that they don't tailorize and tie together their time. They just feel like they're working all the time. So even if I'm just recommending a really quick strategy to someone, like I said, if I meet them on the beach and they ask me a question, is to really create their own schedule that revolves around the life that they want, instead of just working whenever people want them to, whenever they think they should be working. And that's the tailorized part. Like, it's really going to work to be what they want, the lifestyle they want. When their energy is high, know when your energy is high, when your energy is low, when you schedule things. And then the tying together part is really about boundaries. And I can't even tell you how many entrepreneurs have really weak boundaries or no boundaries at all.
There's so many reasons why we get stuck and we're not sure what next is. And so one of the reasons why I put that post together was just to give people an idea of, if they're stuck in a certain way, some strategies for how they could move past that stuck, so that they can get organized or can get to whatever that next that they're trying to do.
Well, I know a lot of times too, when we've got like a project or something, we get overwhelmed by the whole thing that we can't do anything.
That's
so
right.
I hope that's what we're going to help out. So what's your first idea for next steps?
Well, it's great that you actually brought that one up, because the number one thing that I hear is that a client will come to me, or even a friend, family member, and say they are so overwhelmed because what they see is next is this huge thing. It's overwhelming. And what happens is, when they're overwhelmed, they either procrastinate. Do you ever procrastinate? Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, that's a real familiar one for me.
It's real familiar. Or even more than procrastination, there's inaction. In other words, nothing happens. And so the first strategy is what I call go small. And really what that is instead of trying to think of all the steps and this huge project or whatever that big goal is, what is the next smallest, most doable step that you can take that will move you along? And what happens is, if you can think of what that next small, tiny step is, you automatically relax. You don't go into that fight or flight pattern, and you're able to move forward.
And the first one that people think of pretty easily is managing time. The first one is time. So when we talk about your time, what we're trying to understand is how you track the things that you need to show up for. So most people jump in their mind to a calendar, which is the right image to hold on to, whether it is a wall calendar where it's a month at a glance, or whether it is a sophisticated online Outlook or some Google Calendar or something like that. It's a place where you track down the things you need to show up for, such as your appointments or your meetings or picking a child up in the carpool line, places where you need to be at a specific time.
Yes.
So
now,
you always need to be aware of that.
Now, one thing that seems to be an issue occasionally is you're in the middle of doing something and you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, even though something else was on your calendar. Are we going to get into that a little bit?
We are. We're going to get into that when we get into the second leg of the stool.
I like to call your desktop your prime real estate. So only keep things that you have to refer to every day. If it's something that you don't refer to that often, it's really clutter, and you want to put it away neatly in a folder that's labeled so that you can find it. But what happens with a lot of the folks that I work with is they have their whole desktop is completely covered. So let's get rid of those shortcuts. That's a declutter or an organizing for spring or cleaning for spring that we don't think about. The other thing is, when you're talking about your computer in general, keeping it very clean, because again, our hands are dirty. When we're sick, we're coughing on it. Make sure that you wipe it down with appropriate stuff that's not going to damage your computer. Clean off the screen, get things, not only organize on the desktop, but organize and clean the actual computer itself, because it can become a real breeding ground for germs, especially with the flu season. It's still hanging on in there.
When I'm thinking about our outdoor spaces, it's kind of like a big open area. So we really want to think about dividing it into zones and what we want to do in those different areas. So maximizing those zones makes a difference.
Okay. Well, give us an example of what some zones might be, like maybe you either with a client, or what would be some typical, like, are you talking 2 or 3 or 7 or 8? I mean, what would be some examples of that?
What's become really popular are fire pits in our backyard.
Oh, yeah.
So they're kind of conversation areas, which has been really fun because that's a new whole space that you might not have used before in your backyard. And of course, we have recreation with our families. We all want to be exercising, getting outside. So we might even have like a volleyball net. We might have a pool. We might have something that is just promoting our exercise ability. And then we might have just areas that we're gardening, that we're thinking about creating those locally grown produce, things like that. So we have a lot of spaces, even in tiny areas I've seen that are in people's backyards, that we're dividing up into these different areas. And with the different areas, we have different needs. We have different storage needs. We have different use needs. So when we think about our backyard, don't just think about what's the big hole, what are the different little areas, and how are we going to subdivide them, create storage for them, and use them optimally as a result.
Paper is the biggest job that we come across. The most people, the majority of people who contact us, it's paper. They're just drowning in it. So that was my first impression when I received the kit, was just, this is for people who need to get their act together, and it kind of gives a guideline to start doing that.
Well, too, I know in a lot of our different podcasts, when we talk to different organizers, too, there's this concept of prioritizing. Sometimes it's in piles. Sometimes it's, what's the most important to you? What can you keep? What can you throw away? And I think this kit kind of gets us thinking about what are kind of those important papers that you need to do. And so when you talk to like maybe a client, what are some of the things that you're asking them to maybe gather together, that are really the key documents?
Well, I always think about it in terms of, what would you need to take if there was a fire or an emergency and you needed to be able to grab things? Mm-hmm. What are the important documents that you need to be able to take with you? So if you have 8 filing cabinets and you're keeping absolutely everything that comes in, that's just impossible. So you're going to lose things. So I think, really important documents are great in here. Things like passports and birth certificates, those kind of personal documents. Immunizations are great. People, it's like they just sort of disappear in the back of the filing cabinet. Mm-hmm. Estate planning documents, things like that. So it's all in one place. And if you did need to kind of grab and go, you could.
I like the concept of raising problem solvers and not direction followers. That when parents come to me all the time and say, I want my child to be able to do this and that, whether it's get up in the morning or their own homework. But what we find a lot is that the student, the parent is doing very much of the do you have and did you do and you should be. And what happens is that the child maybe might do the things, but they don't have any ownership of it. And more importantly, they don't have any awareness. If you're telling your child, get this, go here, do this, do that, that whole time management piece is missing. That whole even responsibility piece is missing. They're almost removing themselves from the process. They're basically just having you point them in the right direction to go off. So to build those skills, really to build time management, is you start, believe it or not, creating time awareness. Mm-hmm. So instead of saying we're leaving in 10 minutes, it's, do you know what time we have to be at soccer practice? Mm-hmm. Do you know how long it takes us to get there? Okay, 15 minutes. When do we need to leave? Okay, great. How are you going to remember that? By turning that table, what I've done is now all of a sudden, now that doesn't happen overnight. That takes a lot of skill on both the parents and the child's end. But you have to start asking your child questions.
Well, that's it for season 3. Look forward to our next episode of Keeping You Organized, where we kick off season number 4. We'll see you then.